Well, hey, everybody. My name is Caullen Hudson. I'm a Chicago based filmmaker, activist, and fitness professional. I run the nonprofit SoapBox Productions and Organizing. What we do at SoapBox and what I try to do in my work in film, in my podcast, Urban Browntown, and other media and organizing activism work is center, explore, and amplify issues of inequity and how to challenge them with intentionality, creativity, and a radical imagination.
It's great to see you again. I mean, the audience may not know, but I've known you for quite a while, ever since I was earning my BA. And I visited Chicago a couple times, and every single time I did, I tried to link up with you. But the warm-up questions, if you ready.
Here we go.
Yeah, so they just some warm-up questions. Two of them are, if you had to meet one person, who would it be? Yep. And then the last one is sort of like a free answer one. So here we go. So my first question to you is, if you had to meet either Fred Hampton or Jesse Louis Jackson, which one would you pick?
So I'm answering the first one of ours, whoever first, and then that one.
Who would you pick between those two? Like, yeah, I would, if I had the opportunity, I would meet them and learn from them or ask them questions or anything.
Of the two, definitely Fred Hampton.
Fred Hampton.
Of the two, definitely Fred Hampton. Well, here's the thing. I mean, I'm a Chicago transplant, right? I've been here for 12 and a half years or so. And so in coming here for undergrad and for grad school, my thesis was really rooted in Chicago history of organizing and just the culture in general. So I feel like Chicago has a special place in my heart, in that, like, my second coming to consciousness kind of came as I've been here, and rooted in the placemaking here. And so I've always known Fred Hampton was, even when I was a shorty, but especially now being in his streets and really understanding his struggle, what he went through, and understanding the organizing he did back then, and like knowing those same players who like infect those same players who affect policy in Chicago today and stuff, knowing what he did and all the things. And he was a great orator, and he's one of those people who's able to just talk straight with you and talk about that like macro, like heavy shit, but also be accessible to talk to anybody on the block, which I think is something that the organizers I know, I think are good at that. But I feel like people lose that, especially in academic spaces where it's like too heady and academic. Where it's like, all right, like, you understand anti-blackness in public policy, but if Fonum don't understand, like, what's the point type shit. And so he's notorious for being great at that. And I feel like I would have so many questions for him, just as far as his coming to consciousness, how he connect with people, and just during the heightened time when he was alive, and just kind of comparing that to now, and arguably very different, but also like very similar in different ways. So I would have a lot of questions for him.
Yeah, I would think like my biggest question was, how exactly did he organize and communicate it with groups of people who came from different backgrounds, from his own, especially people that, Black folks consider as our enemies and stuff like that. Like, he was getting some of everybody.
It wasn't popular. It wasn't popular. Like back then, even you see, folks talk today about how they, feel differently about that, right? Young patriots and young lords and all that. And it's just like, I think now it's easier to think about cross coalitions, and like working with different groups working in coalition. They have different issues and different like identities and stuff. Like, that's like, I would say the norm now, but it's like, oh, like that happens a lot. But back then, nah, son, not in the middle of like Black Power movement. So, but I think I personally think it's important and it makes sense, right? To understand how like, how anti-blackness and capitalism and patriarchy and all the things affect everybody. Obviously, anti-blackness affects Black folks most, but it's like the way that the state and the way that white supremacist culture that we live in has to convince poor white people that Black folks and brown folks, indigenous folks, are the enemy in order for white supremacy to really exist, and white supremacy actually hurts white people too. Like, that's a hard thing to sell, right? Especially to folks, like to some poor white folks who might have those races in their family, and like kind of So I to be able to do that, I think I agree. As far as that's difficult, especially back then when like it was as much a norm or something we understand now, and was accessible then, or as it is now. So yeah, I would have questions about that too. And again, wasn't super popular then, not popular now in some spaces, but I think it's important to at least make those links.
Yeah, definitely. And I agree with you too. I would have picked Fred Hampton. So okay. Second question. These are musicians now.
Oh,
Okay.
they're getting deeper.
So deeper, yeah. Okay. So a member, so not the whole thing, but a member
Of the Wu-Tang Clan.
of Earth, Wind, and Fire. Okay.
Ooh.
Or Donny Hathaway.
These are good. These are like good and like this is like a cheap answer. I'm gonna say Maurice White. I'm just gonna go with Maurice.
Yep.
I feel like I know
Yeah.
Open and Fire just more anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, as a person who like I wouldn't say platform myself by any means, but it's like that ego and presence, like it's attractive to me, right?
Yeah.
And so it's just like I can't, you know, it's hard not to. But I mean, everyone, there was no wrong answer there for sure.
Yeah. Like you gonna walk away with something regardless of whoever you pick.
Most definitely.
Yeah.
Man, I need to throw on some Eartha Wind
right?
elements.
And make you start thinking like, dang, like you're like, wait, did I pick the right one? Watch, you gonna go off and be all like, yeah, did I pick the right one?
This is gonna keep me up at night for sure.
Right. All right. So, and then the last question is, if you could have one person today, in today's day and age, to turn their attention towards the city of Chicago, who would it be? So they have to drop everything, whatever that they're doing, and they put all their resources, all their attention, all their power towards the city of Chicago for its benefit. Who would it be?
See, I'm bad at these questions. I always want to ask like 30 follow-up questions. Like, well, so what do you mean?
Yeah.
You know, I'm gonna try to be easy and not do that. I think I may choose Oprah.
Really?
And it may seem like a weird answer,
Huh?
but I'll unpack a little bit. So like, obviously Oprah isn't from Chicago, but like has the roots in Chicago, right? Is a billionaire,
Yeah.
and has supposedly given money to you know, groups in Chicago, what have you, but not like for real. And so I think about like the moment. If you asked me this question in 2020, I think it would have been like perfect. But I think about the moment I think we're still in, as far as it's more salient and obvious that the youth of today are the most active generation, the most active and radical generation
Yeah.
since the civil rights movement, maybe ever, arguably. We understand and know the economic systems that are to our detriment and how they've changed over this past couple of decades. We're not afraid to ask or demand money. And we also understand how that's not going to set us free. And so I feel like if Oprah can do no wrong for like broader white audiences, but if she didn't want to, I don't know, I don't say lose her black card, but like, I don't know, I feel like we could demand, like, you got the billions of dollars, which, you know, I don't know who you are. I don't care if you're the most, I don't care who you are, but like billionaires shouldn't exist. So it's like, all right, use these monies and reinvest them into the community. And we're going to tell you exactly how and what to do that. And if I'm hearing the question right, they like drop everything, put all their stuff into there, and she can tell all the people in the world that she has influence over, which is like the universe, hey, Google's Mad City is doing the work. Hey, Azar is doing the work. Hey, SoapBox is doing the work. Use her narrative and power struggles power as far as shifting narrative, changing narrative, and also give money in the hands of people, in the hands of structures that are community based, that are working towards this radical future that we all want. Then like, she's got it, and she's got the not only the raw resource but also the influence over a lot of people. So yeah, Oprah. I'm sure there's a better answer out there, but that's what came to mind. I feel like I can hang my hat on that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, okay. A follow-up question then is, would you say that it's more Oprah's like raw money, and then also her, what's the word that I'm looking for? Like her status and her ability to get that word out is what's the most valuable thing for the organizations that's over there in Chicago that can be utilized the best? I guess I'm trying to indirectly ask, do you think that the organizations that are already established there in the city of Chicago have the know-how, the experience, and the organization in order to make real change if they only had the resources and the money to back it up?
In short, yeah.
Yeah.
And when I mentioned Oprah about like her platform and her having influence, I feel like what can be misconstrued, and maybe I didn't articulate this super well, is like we tend to think about like celebrities or folks with voices that extend beyond our own to like ride in their coattails. And that's not what I mean, right? I think I can pick anyone that has like, you know, I could have picked Jeff Bezos, right? And he could just pour all his money in Chicago, which we do. But it's like those raw resources matter, but also, you know, I SoapBox is a film production company at its core. Everything else kind of coming from that, and so like I think we believe in narrative change and changing how people think about things and making it accessible, but also radical and imaginative and all the things. And those things are practical. And so I think having someone who has this huge influence that can piggyback on those and kind of shift the gaze to the folks doing the work versus herself, which who knows that would happen or not. But in this rhetorical, you know, hypothetical situation, say it does. I think that matters. And those levers of influence matter.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think getting people fired up matters. And I feel like I mentioned if you asked me this question 2 years ago too, it would even matter even more because people will be primed to do things.
Yeah.
And basically folks who are, in my view, centrist politically, swing way to that side and give money to radical groups, like that might change how people think about stuff. But we're not changing what we do or how we move or our politics either. So I'll answer the question or not. That's kind of how I like why you have someone who like has influence matters, and also those people need to eat. Like those resources fucking matter.
Yeah,
we don't have to ride in the state to do that. I think now at least I'm in a better situation to argue for this, as far as like, yeah, we're taking your raw money, but like it's like philanthropy is like, oh, we're giving you these crumbs because we have this huge bag and here's a little bit to like make myself feel better, and actually kind of reify these same systems we want to destroy. Where it's like, no, that money, it actually isn't even yours. Like if you're a billionaire, that money actually isn't yours, and you're to reinvest. You're just giving back to what actually made it possible in the first place. These systems are all inherently corrupt, whether if you're black or whoever else in the rich at the top. So I think way to like say that in the name of Oprah or whoever coming to Chicago or whatever city to invest in the gang for radical liberation. I think that follows through.
Yeah, exactly. Well, since we on the topic of corruption, could you tell just, and I know this is a loaded question, just a little bit about the political climate of Chicago and how it's transformed within the last, almost had 5 years? But maybe I should cut it down to 3.
I mean, you can do 5. I'm gonna give context and background either way.
Okay. Oh, go ahead. Do 5. Do 5.
So 5 would be what, 2017?
Okay,
2017. Well, I think it's funny because even the premise of the question, like Chicago has the reputation of being like corrupt politics, machine politics, and like that reputation is definitely earned. Like don't get it wrong. It's earned. But it's so funny, and people are like, oh, Chicago's corrupt, or this municipality is corrupt. And I'm like, you're not wrong, but every municipality, state government, federal government, or national government, like global multinational corporation, or like, nonprofit, whatever, like these are all practicing on like inherently bad faith most of the time, and or they do a lot of legal shit that's fucked up. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's so funny people need to look like stuff that's like deemed illegal by the state to be bad, where it's like, we gave how much money to Ukraine? Do you have healthcare? Yeah, probably not. Or maybe you do, and it's like, it's not as good as it should be. And it's like, yeah, that was legal. Like that was legal. We gave $750 billion to the military every year. It keeps going up, but you can't pay for school. That's legal. That's what boggles my mind. But also there's corruption or whatever. But it's like, y'all are this right in front of you, and you're looking for these other things that they're telling you are bad. Anyway, that's why I like defending Chicago rant, but also like, you're not wrong, but this shit's
right.
Well, so I think we have to look back at Daley Senior if we talk about Chicago politics. I can't tell you the exact years, but Daley Senior was mayor for a couple of decades. I think the first half of the last century. He came up during the Hamburg gang, which is a white gang in Chicago that terrorized black folks and things. They're a terrible, racist, horrible family. If Bill Daley runs for mayor, don't vote for him. but he was mayor for a minute. Finally resigned, maybe I think the late 80s, I think 89, I believe. Actually, lots of things happen, in these decades. I'm gonna skip a little bit. His son, Richard J. Daley Jr. was elected mayor after Harold Washington died in office, or rest in power. And so that was the end of the 80s. And so obviously he came from a machine politic family, decades of power and corruption and what have you, and like legal violence through the municipality of Chicago, jailing Black street organizations at the time. We're doing like a lot of great stuff for the communities and things. And so I'll give you something to link in the episode notes. So that was the Daley machine is very real. So Daley Jr., he left office, I think in 2011, I believe, made a parking meter deal to set himself up for the future, which was legal but messed up. And so Rahm Emanuel comes and he becomes mayor. Obama's former chief of staff. He has Daley connections. He's kind of like the shoo-in to win the mayorship. And so he goes to term, covers up the shooting of Laquan McDonald to get reelected. He gets reelected, unfortunately. And then he doesn't go for a third term, which is shocking to a lot of people. And I tend to believe it's because a lot of various movements across the city pressuring him so much and not really knowing what to do. I honestly, can say that for sure, but I do feel like we had a lot to do with that, which feels good. He has a run, and so it's an open race in Chicago. And so if you think about it, this is the first legitimate like open race, not like a shoe-in to win since the 80s. You know what I'm saying? It's been 2.5 decades. This is 2019 I'm talking about. And so I think that's just important to think about, right? And so there's lots of folks already going to run and dethrone Rahm and stuff before he announces he's gonna not run for the re-election. And so a lot of folks jump in the race as well. And so Lori Lightfoot was in the race before he even announced. And everyone knows it's going to go to a runoff, which basically means no one gets 50% of the vote, which definitely wasn't going to happen. So the top two people will go to a runoff. At least how it works in Chicago. And so that happens. Lori Lightfoot, who's a corporate lawyer, she sits on the police board. She is this like it's a wild looking back, because even at the time she's like, yeah, I'm a progressive, and I'm like, but you're not though. And I didn't even know, I like knew enough about her. No, I didn't like her, but like I didn't know as enough I do now about her prior to her going to office. So like, oh, like there's something progressive about you, which like is fine, but like stop saying that. Like you're just lying to people. The runoff was her and Tony Preckwinkle, Cook County board president. And so Preckwinkle had some missteps in the past too, and Preckwinkle wasn't like amazing, but she was better than Lori in my eyes. But people knew her and attributed her name to the soda tax and some kind of bullshit things that happened in the county. And so Preckwinkle loses by a lot. But it's not close. It ain't close. And so Lori becomes mayor. All the white liberals are like super excited. And I'm not sure the first thing she did that was fucked up, but like it was very clear kind of early on, even to folks outside of like, my like, crazy leftist space. They're like, yeah, she's not the best. I think, she raised property taxes in her first budget, which was no, actually there's a second budget. Shit on the first budget with conventional political logic, which she didn't, whatever. But the day I was part of a coalition to stop Rahm Emanuel from building a $95 billion at the time Cobb Academy, West Garfield Park. West Garfield Park is a disenfranchised Black neighborhood in the state of Chicago. The day that vote happened, which was an 18-month plus, I think, campaign that we pushed the city, and the city stalled and finally got it out. The day that vote happened, they voted to approve it. That day, Lightfoot was like, yeah, we should turn the closed schools that Rahm closed, the 50 plus closed schools, we should turn those into mini Cobb Academies instead. And before she had critiqued the Cobb Academy plan, she's like, okay, at least you're critiquing that. And then she went back and said that the day this is announced. So from jump, we knew she was bad, and she like said that the day of, the day police were beating young Black women in City Hall because they're protesting the Cobb Academy. She says this. And so that's how it starts before she gets elected.
Yeah.
Gets elected. I can't really imagine. I can't remember exactly what happened in 2019, but it's not great. 2020 happens, COVID hits, obviously everyone's scrambling, including elected officials. And then George Floyd gets killed, uprisings hit, and then her and her goons just kind of go crazy as far as violence in the streets. And her rhetoric really doubles down. and it honestly just gets worse from there. And I say that from my standpoint as like my political viewpoint, and my work, and how I think not the city should remember we should take care of each other in a community, and as well as my just, I guess, traditional American political views.
Mhm.
But it's just the folks who kind of got her elected in the certain pockets of the city who, you look at the numbers, like voted for her and things. I don't know who is like in her corner anymore.
Yeah.
Because from our standpoint, like she loves the cops, but I know like the cops, the FOP doesn't really like her. FOP, Fraternal Order of Police, and like the white liberals who like got her elected, they're like, oh, now I like care about Black lives, and like you're doing all these things, like you're tear gassing people. What's going
Yeah.
on? First, I'm like, I told you, and two, I'm like, yeah, exactly. And so
Mhm.
I'm very curious what's going to happen the spring of next year, which is the municipal elections for Chicago coming up again, but.
Yeah.
She can't lose to nobody, and so it really depends on what happens. But that's kind of what's happened in short, as far as the mayorship and how it's built on decades of machine politics, and that's just like using political power to get what you want done, whether it's legal or illegal.
Mhm.
But 2019 was an interesting moment for me personally, because it was the first real open race in the city of Chicago, and I knew that that was the first time I really knew a lot about how aldermanic seats worked, what alders actually did. Alders or alder people are like the cities split up into 50 wards, and so everyone has a governance over that ward. So other cities, city council members, things like that nature. That's how it works in Chicago. So yeah, I mean, that was a really interesting moment for me. And then moving forward with COVID, the uprisings, the war on crime narrative that's like came back
Yeah.
full force the past 2
Mhm.
years, and seeing all this stuff play out nationally, internationally, but especially in Illinois and in Chicago has been interesting and frustrating, and also beautiful in very small ways for me, as far as how we get the narrative out, how we change this narrative, how we push back in ways that we couldn't 5-10 years ago, just with like how social media works, how more receptible people are to messages like that push back on these traditional talking points. Not as much as they should be, in my view, but it's nice to be able to kind of wedge that gap a little bit and kind of have conversations with folks who prior wouldn't maybe agree or maybe think about things more broadly, in a way I think COVID exposed too, and I think Trump's election exposed as well. It's like
Yeah.
really obvious systemic inequities, and systematic inequities as far as how governments work and things. People are like, this is messed up. And I was like, yeah, guess what? Obama did that. He's just doing it worse. So like, let's just, Trump is a dumpster fire full of dog shit for sure. Don't get me
Yeah.
wrong. But also, so is like the presidency, just the office itself. And so it's like, what are we doing if we're just talking about him and not talking about that role in the world?
Right.
And I think we're doing a disservice if we're just looking at these people in these positions, not necessarily the structure itself.
Mhm. So, in your opinion, or maybe you've already practiced it inside of your organization, or organizations out there inside Chicago, how do you change people's mind to stop looking at the individual and to look at the system in and of itself, and trying to promote like, hey, we need to start thinking about abolition and also start thinking about rehabilitation and how rehabilitation can transform into restorative justice? Because people always talk about, at least inside like my space, in my corner, they're talking about like, oh, prison reform and things like that, but you can't reform something that was rooted in racism. So you can transform it all you want, and you can make it a little less ugly. There's no such thing as making it a little less better. I mean, making it better. But like, how do you transform people's like mindsets and like introduce the idea um of abolition, especially with you know a unique population like the people inside Chicago, and people who have seen like blatant racism, blatant oppression, blatant you know corruption inside systems of government? I just want to get your feedback on that and your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's tough, right? I mean,
Yeah.
for me, I think one tool is taking an example or something, not necessarily small, something kind of very concrete, and then like broadening it out, those lessons out a little bit. And obviously, if you're talking like in one-on-one conversation, I think it's like, what does that person care about? What is that thing you can think about or talk to them about? And like, how can you make it real for them? I think that's part of what organizing is. And I think we at SoapBox, part of our thing too is to talk about like this campaign, this thing, here's how to get involved, but also let's take the curtain down and see like exactly how big this actually is.
Yeah.
So when it comes to like defunding the prison industrial complex to abolition, if that's like kind of route we're talking about, I mean, for me, I use examples like George Floyd, right? So George Floyd happens, and even prior to George Floyd being murdered, a couple weeks prior, everyone found out about Ahmaud Arbery. And I'm in the fitness industry, and so like on my Instagram is full of people, a lot of white people, but also people of color and Black folks being like, oh, I'm gonna do my 2.25 run in honor of Ahmaud, I'm also not like, I'm just not always the nicest person, so I'm just kind of rolling my eyes like, we're gonna what? But I'm glad people were like at least kind of tapped in. And so it's I'm not trying to put myself in any kind of like weird moral high ground, but that happens. And I post like a bunch of books, and I'm like, hey y'all, like white supremacy is these guys killing this Black man jogging, for sure, no doubt. White supremacy is also the bail system. White supremacy is also a mayor suppressing a tape of a Black teenager getting killed when re-elected. White supremacy is also, I name all these things. And post these fucking books, like Asad Shakur's autobiography and just random stuff and so whatever. And so a couple weeks later, George Floyd's murdered. And for me, and maybe this is me just being desensitized to this as the person I am, which is not great, or maybe it's just American television, or maybe it's me doing this work and then like seeing a lot, hearing about it a lot. But I'm like, fuck, that's terrible. It's Monday. Like that's just what they do.
Whatever.
So it took me like the whole week when things kept popping up and sustaining themselves to understand, oh, this is a moment, and to get really broad from there. And so I think and of course, then like the defund conversation was big, whether if you were defund and stop there, or if you were defund abolition or whatever. And it was amazing seeing. It's amazing for someone who's done this work for a while and who came to abolition. Took a little bit, but like came to it before 2020 for sure. And then seeing people really start listening and paying attention, and then understanding just how much money goes into policing, and how much little money goes into literally anything else that you care about. And so it's like, cool, let's hold on to this. Like, really, defund is the floor. That's like the easy first step. And we have a whole lot of work to do, but let's hold on to there. And so with something like that, I think with the broader conversation of police and prison abolition, I think the numbers are something people can like latch onto and understand a little bit, which I think is kind of sad at a certain point, but kind of understand. And then we have folks' attention, you can back up and look at like the history, and then framing. I mentioned earlier about like propaganda and framing and narratives. It's so important because how many like primetime television shows are based somehow in like cops or lawyers or something? Like, how many movies are based on like military doing something? Like how much like is propaganda and violence baked in as a just response to everything we do? And then when something happens, there was a shooting last night in Chicago in the near north area, which is the kind of affluent area. And people are like, how did this happen? Why did this happen? It's like, well, we respond to violence in all the ways. So like, why are you getting mad at certain people for talking about violence in music or it happening on the streets when we're not responding that way in any other facet? Or we're not funding RJ, Restorative Justice, we're not funding TJ, Restorative Justice, we're not funding any of the other things that are happening now and happening and like working in a lot of pockets, but our hard work. And if you funded those things, then maybe like we wouldn't see so much of that. So I back up and look at like the framing, right? And I think once you understand, to your point earlier, that the prison industrial complex, prisons, police, what have you, these systems are working well. They're working how they intended to work. And you don't think of them as like flaws or systems broken. I think that changes a lot because you see that police started from slave catchers. They're an evolved, more militarized version of slave catchers. Obviously, have police globally, But in America, it's a special branch, a special anti-Black
Yeah.
brand
Yeah.
of state operations, state violence. And they've always managed to protect property and control whatever the oppressed social group is at the time, and then keeps putting that under the umbrella, whether that's immigrants, whether that's LGBTQ plus folks, whether that's, insert any oppressed group here. And it's still like that. And it's re-engineered like that, and it's hyper militarized. So I think it's understanding that framing is important. And understanding that hasn't really changed, it's re-engineered itself. And so anything they do to make themselves look more palatable, community policing, Black cops, gay cops, like they're still cops. And I listened to the episode you had prior. I forgot the gentleman's name. And I remember he mentioned, like, he has people in his family who are cops, and he mentioned a couple different things about police abolition / reform and stuff. And it's like, yeah, all cops are bastards. I think like individual people can be good and mean well, but like cops in a system of policing, and policing as a logic and institution is inherently anti-Black, is inherently anti-poor, is inherently anti-insert, any of the isms here. And so when we start kind of backing up as far as looking at folks in the systems as a systems, I think we get to we can critique it more so without getting so triggered in a certain way. But I think that framing is important. I think that history is important. I think with the reform conversation, it's interesting hearing folks talk about it. I wouldn't say who don't do the work or haven't like studied or looked after anything, but it's interesting seeing folks have the same ideas on how to fix this system that we've done before. Like, put all your political beliefs aside and just say, what have we tried? Oh, all the things we're talking about now, we've done all of that before, and it never works. After the civil rights movement, when I think news footage was still not new, but it was still kind of an advent. It was still kind of a new thing. Seeing Black folks getting hosed down by police officers, and seeing and hearing about all this horrible stuff. In the 80s and 90s, maybe not so the 80s, but the 90s for sure. After the crack epidemic got big, the reform industry got big, right? They were talking about community policing, having programs with cops and kids and all these kind of things. We've done community policing before, and Mike Brown still happened, and George Floyd still happened, Sandra Bland still happened, Rekia Boyd still happened. Like, that didn't fix the 90s. We've done this before. After Mike Brown, the Ferguson uprising was the first like really big moment of uprisings against police, at least in my lifetime, at least my adult age. Obviously the state been killing Black folks, but this is the first kind of bigger moment in this age of social media, which I think is important to note as well. And after that happens, it's like, okay, how do we reform the police? And again, Obama's president, right? And so let's give them more money to train them better. I want to see someone just explain to me what do you think that means? Like, why does it take more money to tell you not to kill innocent Black people?
Well, my first question is like, well, where did they start? What was your training?
Yeah, and it's like they're doing what they're supposed to do. Like, well, it may be more egregious, but like, I don't like. Why are you confused? Why are you shocked? And so after Ferguson, we see more money into training. We see body cams, which lots of times those kind of go back. They actually don't work in our favor, and they work again for the police favor. It's always more these reforms. They give more money and resources to police some capacity. We have like ShotSpotter and other like audio surveillance technology, which is to hear gunshots and have the police react after the fact. It's just policing as an institution and as a logic is inherently violent. It can't not be violent, right? Police brutality is like saying ATM machine, automatic teller machine. Policing is in violence. You just gotta say policing is all you gotta do. Policing is inherently violent. It's reactionary. They show up after shit already happens and try to find the culprit, right? There is no community investment or any understanding of how we got to these ills in the first place and made folks want to do these crimes of survival, and they got to the umpteenth where harm occurred. And they're ineffective. A lot of like the what about questions with abolition, or even with defunding. But what about the murderers? What about the murderers? We got I'm just getting an old stat. There's like 13% clearance rate in Chicago for murder, and it's like, y'all. So it's obvious. It's not very clear where it's like, look, and I get where people come from. I get this is like tough, especially in 2020. People are like, this. Oh my God, Black people matter and policing are bad. I get it, and I then more than now try to be sympathetic, try to understand, try to meet
Yeah,
folks
yeah.
halfway. But sometimes it's like, oh, like because you're like you don't really understand how it actually works. I think propaganda is real and it's effective. We think that like Law and Order, that's like every day at a police station.
Yeah.
That's like 7% of what they do, right? They're doing traffic and everything. Like, why? Like, why are they going to interact with the community that much? And so I think we have this idea that the hardened criminals, quote unquote, and the really violent and egregious crimes are happening all the time. That's all police do, and it's like 7% of the job. They're the 17th, I think, most dangerous job. And so it's just that narrative switch. I always go back to that. I think that's we have to kind of start there with ourselves to start kind of unpacking all these things, starting believing some of these things we're actually understanding as how policing works. And that's like I could go on. I could do this for the whole thing, but that's like part of what this abolition is. But the other part is it's presence. Abolition is presence. I think Mariam Kaba kind of teaches us that, and it's like it's not only taking down this horrible system, it's building up something new. It's funding education, it's funding healthcare, it's funding all the things, and it's also understanding that we have to do this ourselves. I still am this way a little bit to catch the right moment, but who ask like what's next after policing? What is the thing? What does abolition look like? I was like, oh, well, we do this and we do that, TJ and RJ, which is all true.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's like, well, what do you think it is? What do you think we should do? It's like this is not a transactional relationship. This has to be a based in community. We have to be able to trust each other, and when harm does occur, figure that shit out, and not rely on the state, which is inherently violent, inherently upholds white supremacy and all these isms that we don't like. And so part of it is with us. We have to like come to the table and just talk about things and try things out and figure it out. Also the what about question, and that's not easy, right? And I understand that. And the what about question too, I'm borrowing this from I forgot who, but it's like it's not fair for you to ask me that and not fund it. The military in the US gets $780 billion a year. I think Department of Homeland Security is like 20 billion or so. $2 trillion the war in Afghanistan. That was just a separate war budget. Police in Chicago, 2 billion a year. Police in New York, 10 billion a year. And you're asking me what happens next when that's gone? They want me to come up with a foolproof plan and just give it to you for how we change society. Yeah. Give me the $10 billion that NYC has, NYPD, sorry, has, and give me a couple years, and like honestly, it'll be better. It'll be good. Yeah. But like, it's not fair for you to ask me that and not anything. And also, we're still doing that work without even being resourced. And so it's just like it's just not a fair question. Right. And it's just devoid of any history or understanding of like just how monumental the resources they have to do nothing and to be ineffective. Right. You know what I'm saying? Like nothing else works that way. Like, why would you go to the same restaurant if the food was always bad, service was awful, and the prices kept going up? You wouldn't go there anymore. Right. Just try the one down the block. Just try. If it doesn't work, you can go back to it. Just try it. So I don't know. I'll stop there, but it's just like all these things are part of it. And like it's not easy, especially if you're new to coming to this. And I wish I kind of like ordered that in a way that felt better, but it's just like it gets me frustrated, and like sometimes I just laugh because I'm like, what are we doing, y'all? What are we doing? The shooting, I'll stop in a minute. The shooting I mentioned last night, I think 9 folks were injured. I think 2 folks lost their lives last night, and no one wants that, right? Like we want to find a way that doesn't happen at all. And the response, and the brief article I wrote, was to put more Chicago police officers on the CTA. Y'all already on the CTA, and these people still got killed. So it's almost like, what, like, why? Why is that? You going in circles. Thank you. Please stop me. And why do we pay for the CTA in the first place? Like, I don't know. Anyway.
No, you're not going in circles. They going in circles.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm also going in circles. You got me off easy.
No, well, actually, I want to jump back in there because so like I love that analogy that you just provided. That like, why would you keep going to a restaurant when you know the service is bad, the food is bad, the atmosphere is bad, like everything is bad about it. But I think that like or at least people's biggest argument is it's always like, well, that's the only restaurant that we have, you know, and things like that. And like the two options that we have right now is, well, I want maybe even three options too, is go cook for yourself, which is organize and do the work yourself and things like that. Or the second option is invest inside of restaurants, mom and pop shops that, you know, cater towards a palette that is more sustainable. I think those are like the two options, but like I think people are stuck on the idea that this is the only restaurant that we have, and like what about, you know, the murderers or the violent crimes and things like that, which I can go on a complete tangent about, because I can go off on like the statistics of like how many violent offenders are currently incarcerated right now compared to like drug crimes, like minor drug crimes. And like I just recently talked to somebody who was like, how can we like abolish the police when we just like had that shooting over there in like in Buffalo, New York? And I was like, well, why are we giving 18-year-olds assault rifles? So I was like, why did you sell that to him in the first place? So, and I was like, maybe you need to nip the problem in the bud and actually look at it closely, like, well, what is their gun control laws? Why are we allowing, you know, someone who can't smoke handle an assault rifle? So it's absolutely ludicrous to me, the things that you can and cannot get away with here in the United States. But it makes perfect sense as well if you look at the system that we're currently operating in. And the reason why I want to jump back into that is say that you were given that sort of, I'm gonna just call it as is, flimsy argument that like we can't abolish the police and we can't abolish, you know, these institutions because we won't have any line of protection towards people who actually commit crime. What would be like your first response to that? Because I know that my first response would be like, well, restorative justice, you need to actually go to the community that individual originated from, or you need to start questioning bigger systems and ideologies, because that was a product of white supremacy. That is something that we keep sweeping under the rug. Yeah, it's just like we don't teach about that, like inside public education, hell, inside like college education, things like that. You have to like literally educate yourself when it comes to white supremacy and actually learn how to combat that. So I wanted to get like your perspective and your sort of piece of advice on how to first sort of combat arguments like that or ideas like that, like, well, we need the police in order to protect ourselves towards, you know, people who commit crime. And then second, how can people address white supremacy both at a micro level and at a macro level for like huge systems?
Yeah, it's tough. And I think, again, going back to like the having a conversation with folks, it all kind of boils down to that one-on-one interaction in a lot of ways. And so, and I think now I'm better at just kind of asking questions.
Yeah.
A little bit, right? I probably would have said something like the rant I went on just a moment ago. But I think part of it is like, okay, so like, what can you define Operation Talk definition? Can we define crime? Or like, what is like crime? What do you mean? Asking those kind of probing questions and things. If someone did kind of bring up like whichever mass shooting happens, because obviously it's a frequent occurrence in the United States, not anywhere else. To your friend's point, asking about like, how are we going to abolish the police, or how are we going to defund the police if that shooting has happened? I would say, well, the shooting already happened. So like, it already happened. They came after the fact, and like, I guess he didn't kill more people, but like, it happened. So how can we prevent those things from happening, especially things like that that are just egregious and really, in the first place? And I think to January 6th, 2021 a lot too,
Oh,
because yeah, obviously it was a crazy day. It was actually was a violent day. Lots of times when property is damaged, it's like violence. And it's like that's not violence, but people did lose their lives that day, right? And
yeah,
so
yeah.
when we look at January 6th and there's no Capitol Police, there's no DC police around, they walk right up in the Capitol.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm laughing because I think black folks in general, but especially black moving folks, are just kind of like, well, I mean, I watch with popcorn like that Michael Jackson meme. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
go ahead. Oh, this is crazy. And so it's just funny when people are like, where are the police?
Mhm.
Where are the police? And
They in there.
it's
They in
almost
there.
crystallized because you don't have to make a broader argument as far as like, oh, these folks are for Trump and Trump's a white
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
supremacist and they're upholding white sentiment. No, you can be like, the police are there.
Mhm.
Like not only are they in the crowd, but they're literally opening the gates for them to come in. And that's policing. Policing
Mhm.
upholds white supremacy. It upholds capital. Um, and that's what that happened on January 6th. And also, why do we care about this building so much that the legislation passed in that building, the
Mhm.
anti-homeless legislation, the war budget, and I could go on, all these bills that pass all the time that do far more damage, are far more violent than that one day.
Mhm.
We care about the sanctity of the Capitol. Get the fuck out of here with that
Right.
bullshit. Um, and don't be wrong, I do think there is we can use electoralism in a way to maybe to help some of these ills and stuff like that. But it's like
Mhm. Mhm.
on the grand scheme of things,
Yeah.
historically, it's like, why do you care about this fucking building so much? First of all, secondly, the cops were there; they were in the crowd and they helped them in. One of the folks was acquitted because he's like, well, the cops let me in. He was acquitted, and I was like, yeah, they should have acquitted you because
Yeah.
they let you in. Like that is policing. That
Mhm.
lack of presence for insurrectionist white supremacists who are upholding Trump this huge pedestal, like that is policing. Um, so again, I think it's broadening out and asks those bigger questions. It's kind of holding on to what someone maybe what someone's issue is and kind of thinking about that. Um, and I think one of the whatabouts with abolition is, well, if we abolish the police, we have to change everything.
Yeah.
And you're right.
Yeah.
And that's exactly the point. Something I'm thinking about too the past year or so is how much abolition of the PIC and abolishing capitalism need to kind of work hand in hand, because again, abolishing the police isn't like you Thanos snap and then the police
Yeah.
are gone. That's never been what it actually means, right? But it is we eventually don't have this institution that's built on all these isms that we don't care for, but also we're building up new systems of care and community and starting that in all facets of our life. And that's something that I look back on 2020 and really appreciated it, because it wasn't just this happened, oh, let's look at the Minneapolis Police Department and see what's to do there. Though that did happen for sure.
Mhm.
But all cities kind of have their like, hey, well, ours PD ain't shit too.
Yeah.
Let's get work with them. But it wasn't just policing or the carceral systems. It was also like every industry and most of them in bad faith. Don't get me wrong. I'm not commending like, the millions of emails you got after being like, we care about Black lives. But
Yeah.
it was funny because it was like every industry was like looking at itself in some capacity and like how maybe we're not giving money to police or we're not giving money to Israel or something, but how are we reifying anti-blackness and white supremacy in how we do things? And again, a lot of us in bad faith, a lot of us not done well, but all industries looking at themselves in that way, not just organizations that actually do this work and stuff. And so I think part of those bigger questions you talk about when you're talking to someone about things is to like, A, just hear from them and see where they're coming from. Um, I think that's like one. I think two is understanding a lot of the framing things that are untrue and it's outright lies about like what cops actually do, about how the things we need to survive, the life affirming institutions, are not funded or not cared about, or we don't appreciate them as a priority. As we as people, especially you and I, Black men,
Yeah.
are kind of trained to combat issues with violence or it's you know, it's always like a me versus him type of thing. And then just getting away from all those things and all then think about what we're going to build up and actually add to the world. And so I think it's a lot of different things we go into. Again, I went there ran for about 10 minutes about all the things. And so I think to crystallize this, like talking to someone, what is their issue? What do they care about? How do we fix that framing? Because the facts will come. We can give them all the stats and they may not listen. The stats and the facts and the how much money police get, all that will come and that's there. That's Googleable. But the framing, I think, is super important as far as like this job actually isn't dangerous. 7% of it is what you think. You know, it's a logic, right? The way we like speak to each other, the way we punish our children. I don't have any kids, but presumably, right? The way all of that up until the military budget and how we look at international conflict. So I'm not sure that answers your question, but I think it's a lot of things. And I think we just have to, contrary to what I said earlier, be patient with folks sometimes, but also it's not always your role. Sometimes like, hey, like here are the things. Here's this thing to read. If you don't want to read it, that's cool, but I don't have time for it. So I think everyone has a role in this as well. I think lots of times people will ask me about conversations and narrative change and just activism in general. They'll be like, well, you know, this video y'all made or this thing you said or whatever, like some people might react this way. I'm like, and they might. And that's I didn't say my role was to get everyone at every point to kind of come to my side. I think there's certain types of folks I can reach. I being Caullen myself, not even the soapbox. But not my bag isn't everybody, right? So I think understanding just like your capacity in all this too, no matter how much you've done or know or what have you, and people close to you are going to listen to you the most. I think it's fascinating talking to like I don't know, like the good whites that I know, the good white people that I know, and like, yeah, my uncle voted for Trump, and I'm like, man, that is fascinating. Like, how do you like? Do you engage? Do you not? Is it too much for you? What, you know, what's that like? Because for me, it's like, for my family, I love my family a bunch. And my parents they're in their 60s, whatever, 60-year-old Black folks, and we talk about these things decently often whenever I'm around them and stuff. But I know, you know, we're not aligned the same politically. Like in the primaries in 2016, my dad voted for Hillary, and I was like, "What?" I was on the phone for like an hour, and I'm like, "This is not the thing you should do." And that was my version of the Trump vote in my family. But I'm like, "Oh, your family, your dad actually voted for Trump. How does that work?" But it's like you're the person that connected to them more so than like Rachel Maddow. You know what I'm saying? And so, yeah, cherishing those connections and being able to do the thing and talk to the people that you're closest with about this stuff. It's hard. It's hard, and I like. Do this. I don't say a lot, but like, you know, I'm talking about this stuff now. I have my little talking points or whatever. Like I do this, and it's still hard. So yeah, no one's saying this shit is easy, but we intentionally organize our society around violence and harm and control and oppression. And if we just didn't do that, we'd be light years ahead of where we think we can be. I think when folks hear abolition, they often think of, oh, you want a perfect world with no harm and everything's great. And it's like, do I want that? Sure. But like, that's not what I'm asking for. I'm just saying, let's like intentionally
and it's not
make systems created to kill people. Like the prison industrial complex is a death-making institution. That's not hyperbole. I think also a lesson I've really been confronted with, especially this year, is just like all those isms and stuff are in ourselves. And we have to understand that how we bring that harm around the world, no matter how micro or meso or macro, do that work too. And that work's hard and uncomfortable and embarrassing. But if you have some kind of privilege, especially, you have to confront that in a way, have people around you that are going to hold you accountable in a certain way. So it's all levels. It's top down, it's left, right, it's diagonal, opposite diagonal, I don't know. And this shit's hard. It's hard. It's not easy. But we have to, because this is not sustainable. It's not sustainable
at all. Well, we have hit our limit. But before we go, I wanted to ask, were there any like plugins or recent projects or any ways that we can actually tune in to either branches for your company? And then what are like some current projects you probably are working on, if we can support in any way or get out the word? What you got for us?
Totally. We just dropped a short video series with the Illinois Prison Project called We Are More. We interviewed a couple of different formerly incarcerated folks talking about their experience getting these crazy decades long, like life plus more years sentences. And they all got clemency in some capacity. They work with Illinois Prison Project, IPP, and they talked to us about their experience. And so SoapBox Ps and Productions O's and Organizing.com/we-r-more. You can see that whole project. It's also on social media for us. So it's at SoapBox PO on all the things: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. So that's the most recent kind of project. I think it taps into a lot of what we're talking about right now. Illinois passed the Safety Act, I think in 2021, maybe 2020, one of those 2 years, and pretty much it has a whole host of criminal justice reforms, including abolishing bail starting 2023, which is great.
Wow.
But this year, the Republicans and centrist Dems are coming hard, trying to take it down somehow. So that kind of sparked this project in a lot of ways, combating that narrative. And again, that tough on crime narrative. It's like, we've done this before. Clinton did this in the 90s, didn't work. We keep doing this and it's still not working. We passed this great bill. And I'm not even a big fan of like electeds and bills and like whatever, but it's like, this is good. This is a good thing. So this project is kind of pushing back into that narrative. We'll have a podcast component to it as well, which I'm excited about. That's the most recent thing. Again, anything with SoapBox Productions and Organizing at SoapBox PO, Linktree/SoapBox PO. For myself, you can find me talking my shit. I'm probably most active on Instagram, Caullen Fit, CAULLENFIT. If you're on the Twitter, if you're tweeting, at Caullen Hudson, CAULHUDSON. Linktree as well, Linktree/Caullen Hudson. Yeah. Oh, you can support SoapBox, soapboxpo.com/support. You want to toss us that bag, that'll be much appreciated. Tax deductible. We're 501c3, so get at us. And Bourbon and Browntown, that's the podcast. If you type in anywhere you find your podcast, Bourbon space in space Browntown, it'll pop up. Me and my colleague David throwing it down, having these conversations, talking with the awesome folks doing the work. And that's been really, really fun. And I feel like I learn things as I process with other people, like right now. And so definitely take a look at that. Hit that follow button, subscribe.
Well, thank you so much for joining us here at OSM.